Welcome to the Mental Health Bootcamp podcast.
Hooray!
Woo.
There was a voice that time.
Woo. This is the podcast where 4 psychotherapists, 3 of us Canadian, 1 of us American, serve you cutting edge mental health knowledge. I am Dr. Ryan Howes, a clinical psychologist from Pasadena, California.
I am Brooke Lewis, a registered clinical counselor from the Vancouver, Canada area.
And I'm Joanna Boyd, also a registered clinical counselor from the Vancouver area.
I'm Chris Boyd, a psychotherapist from the greater Vancouver area.
Hooray!
Woohoo!
We're all here. The gang is all here.
Mm-hmm.
One of us had a birthday this week. It wasn't me.
That was me, yep, on Monday.
Yes.
It was a splendid time.
Very nice. That's great. And
yeah, I was hoping to get out of town, but we can't do that yet in BC here, so stay close to home, but it worked out really well. Had some backyard hangouts with some friends and family.
oh my.
It was fun.
Yeah, you guys are still in kind of a tighter lockdown than we are here in California, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's getting better, hopefully. So we got some good news this past Tuesday on our reopening plan. So if we can stick to it, then hopefully we'll catch up to you guys down in California.
That's great. Just open the border. That's all I want. Let me come up there and hang out with you guys again.
That would be great.
Would it be cool to do a podcast from all 4 of us in the same room?
It would be amazing. It would just be
fun.
one screen.
Be one screen. We'd have to like pass a microphone around or something. I don't know how it would work.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
There must be a way where you can have an attachment into one computer and multiple microphones, because people sit in the same room and do podcasts all the time.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sure there's some sort of a line splitter or something like that. If you know out there, listening public, and you want to help us out with that, info@mentalhealthbootcamp.com.
How do we have 4 microphones and 1 video?
One
Donations are appreciated.
Just donations of knowledge.
You'll get a shout out. Yeah.
That's it. Right. Well, great. It is certainly, I can see through Brooke's camera, if you're watching on YouTube, I can see that it is still very much light out there. It's the sun has been set here for 2 hours, and you guys are still working on some twilight there, aren't you?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a little bit of a darker day. You can kind of see out Joanna's window a little bit too. Yeah, there you go. So it's definitely a lot of clouds today, so it appears a little darker, but next week should be quite bright, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Time we're doing this. Pretty crazy.
It is
I'm
pretty
liking
crazy.
it.
Yes. Speaking of next week, we have a special event coming up for next week. If any faithful listeners out there will recall, we started doing a book club a couple months ago. And we did our first book was Together by Vivek Murthy. We spoke about that a month ago, and we all read it and kind of had our thoughts, gave our opinions, and kind of voted on it, whether we liked it or didn't like it. This month, we did also choose a book. We chose it several weeks ago, but have failed to mention it over the last few episodes. But this book is called The Gift, and it is by
Edith Eger.
Edith Eger.
E-G-E-R.
Yes, Edith Eger. It is not a very long book. For me, since I listened to it, it was about a 5-hour listen, which is pretty short by audiobook standards. And this is a woman she's a psychologist who survived a time in a concentration camp in Germany, I believe.
Yeah,
And
Auschwitz.
Was it Auschwitz? Was she in Auschwitz?
Yeah.
I already read the book, but I'm starting to lose the details already. But she this is a book where she talks about kind of life lessons that she learned and things that helped her kind of persevere and overcome a lot of hardships and difficulties in her life. And so we chose this book thinking it might be a good addition, a good source of discussion for us. So we're going to talk about that book next week on this podcast.
We sure are.
So if you haven't picked up a copy yet, go ahead and do so. The Gift, Edith Eger. And I've already read it. Brooke's halfway through.
There's no time like the present. Go buy the gift.
Go buy the gift. We don't get any kickbacks for this. It's just something we wanted to do together. I thought it might be kind of fun to do a book club. If you guys have any suggestions also for future book clubs, because I think next week we'll probably talk about what our next book will be.
Yes.
So if anyone has any thoughts on what they might want to hear us discuss, might want to read along with us, please drop us a line. info@mentalhealthbootcamp.com or our Facebook or wherever you find us. We're everywhere.
That would be great.
That would be great.
There's a lot of really good books out there. It's hard to know what ones to pick and why, and everyone is drawn to something different. So
sure.
Any recommendations would be wonderful.
I just have to say probably something that at least touches upon mental health somehow would be a good book, you know?
That's a good point. Yes.
You know, just a general cookbook or a, sci-fi, although some of those are touch mental health issues, but yeah, let's just try to keep it in the mental health area. That'd be nice. Very cool. So, well, guys, I guess it's almost time for our ambush here. This is,
are you excited?
I'm very excited. Brooke always seems to come up with some
doozies.
Sometimes gives us some real curveballs, but I'll tell you, some of Brooke's curveballs, as we were reviewing tonight, looking at some of our stats, Brooke's curveballs are some of the most listened to episodes. So
we'll see if it happens again.
We will see.
Remember that time I did sleep hygiene part 2, and then you guys gave me a hard time, and since then, whoo, doozies. Really overcompensated for that. Protective strategy so that I don't get bugged again.
Oh, it's all in good fun, Brooke. It's all because we love you, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
okay.
ambush.
Are you guys you ready? Should I send it?
No one else does. She's going to send it across the border right now. The only thing coming across the US-Canada border is Brooke's text.
Boop.
No people, no travel. Okay. All right, Brooke. You got us. You got us here on this one. All right. The topic is toxic masculinity, part 2. Just kidding. No, this one. Here's the topic. Ready? Codependency, gaslighting, and other toxic relationship patterns. Codependency, gaslighting, and other toxic relationship patterns.
Is there a question?
No, that's it. It's just a general exploration. Yeah.
So is our dad showing up right now? Dennis?
No, there's nobody is popping yet. Am I being punked right now? Ashton.
Yeah. No, it's a good topic.
Yeah.
So he's going to explore those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What made you think of this one, Brooke?
My client earlier today. Yeah. So she's having some relationship challenges, and she's concerned if she's in a codependent relationship and if they're getting stuck in it, and reviewing her relationship history. And she has a history of dating persons who aren't formally diagnosed, but could be a bit more on the narcissistic side. She may have some traits of BPD, codependency stuff, and but then it shows, codependency kind of gets thrown around. Gaslighting, that term gets used a lot right now. But yeah, there's so many unhealthy, or not just unhealthy, but really toxic relationship patterns out there. So I thought it'd be worth a go. We can discuss them. I'm sure our clients bring them up all the time. Whether intimate relationships or friendships, family members. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Codependency, certainly. Gaslighting, which tends to be a kind of a byproduct of a narcissistic relationship oftentimes.
That's where it seems to get pinned, but I think it's getting thrown around a lot more
It
than
is.
just in those, but yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy making.
Boy, people talk about trauma bonds. That's another
hot one
that's coming up a lot these days. So I guess what we're doing is kind of exploring and maybe defining, as we always do. We start with defining things because these terms sometimes get so overused in public discourse that they become jargony, and we kind of lose sense of what it is that we're talking about, right? Like codependency actually is, I'm glad you started with that one, because it was very early in my training, many moons ago. A client came in and said, I'm struggling with codependency. And I went, oh gosh, codependency. Yeah, let's dive into that. And then I went to my supervisor afterwards and I said, my client's dealing with codependency. And the supervisor said, what does that mean? What is that? Codependency isn't, it's not a diagnosis. And exactly. It also means so many different things to so many different people. I believe the original definition of codependency had to do with actual addiction literature, where people were someone who was addicted to the addict, someone who's codependent. The person is an alcoholic, and then their partner, the enabling partner, someone is kind of addicted to them, meaning they can't let them go, have to keep being there to take care of them and all of that.
Which then deflects from their own psychological piece, right? Like, how are they coping and what emotions are coming up for them? And it completely deflects the focus from them onto this person. Yeah,
exactly. But nowadays it's more of a general thing. Addiction may have nothing to do with it, and it's just people who are really losing themselves in their relationship, really so overly, the boundary has become so loose, and they're giving so much to the other person that they kind of lose a sense of who they are. And they get so overly focused on meeting the needs of others that they don't meet their own.
If they even know what their own.
Yeah, maybe even lost touch with that, or never got in touch with it in the first place. Sure. So that's kind of the way I understand codependence. Do you guys have any other thoughts on what it is?
That sounds good to me. I didn't realize the original definition of it was linked to addiction. So I didn't know that, but
that's how it was taught to me, at least. I'm speaking off the cuff here, but yeah.
No, that definition sounds pretty good. It can, as you mentioned, it can look so differently based on the relationship, right? There's lots of different examples of that we hear about, but pretty funny though that you talk to your supervisor and say, yeah, codependency. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because
it's a really good question.
And I'm really glad that was one of the first lessons I learned as a therapist. It's like, it's really what we do here every time. You have to define your terms. Someone says I'm depressed, or I'm bipolar, or I have borderline personality disorder, whatever that might be. You really have to, you don't just take that for what you're assuming that to be. You have to dive in and say, what does that mean to you? What does that look like for you? Because my idea of what codependence looks like could be very different from what you're trying to describe to me. So let's clarify our terms here.
No, I'm on board with you, Ryan. Like, just kind of that general sense of it, instead of having an identity with an I, it's an identity with a we. Like, it's you lose yourself as something else and into something else, and breaking that is can be really detrimental for people, right? Which then keeps them often stuck in these relationships which are unhealthy, or in a pattern that's unhealthy as well. So
yes.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it can be natural within a friendship or relationship that the relationship becomes the focus, and you may lose a little bit of that sense of self. But maybe you're creating something special with that individual that's very beneficial and positive. But isn't there like an enabling part of this where you're kind of enabling certain behaviors that might be toxic or unhealthy?
Well, I think just by not showing up, if you're the codependent partner there who's losing yourself in this relationship, then your needs are not even really showing up, right? So eventually you're going to feel depleted, maybe resentful, maybe just unable to function as well because your needs aren't being met. And yes, there's often a lot of blind spots that go along with this too. Like, oh, as the codependent partner, you're looking at someone else, your partner, and saying, oh, well, you want me to do all these things? Okay, whatever makes you happy, whatever you want or need, which could be a violation of your own boundaries or your own values, or things that you find to be really important parts of the relationship. So yeah, there's a lot of room there for someone to be kind of trampled on as far as what their needs might be.
Yeah, but oftentimes they get something out of it too, right? So they might be enabling their partner's mental health concerns, but they're getting something from it too. Maybe it's companionship or security of some kind. So it kind of goes both directions, right? Which is, again, can be unhealthy in so many different ways.
Yeah. Yes. And I would even say that the security of that is kind of flimsy, right? Because the security is really based on, as long as I'm able to meet all of my partner's needs, then they'll stay with me. Or as long as my partner needs me to meet their needs, then they'll stay with me. Which is, I don't think that's a very conditional security, right? It's
true.
As soon as I'm unable to meet those needs, then I risk being left or, dumped, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And based on that person's history, maybe the fact it's familiar leads to that sense of safety and security. But I get, as you mentioned, though, it's not healthy.
Right.
Can we break it down? Is there telltale signs for someone to recognize if they're, in it? Like even Brooke, your client, who's like, I think this is what's going on. Were there examples she was giving? Did she note that, there's maybe things going on and that she was having a hard time with boundaries herself, or, yeah.
Oh yeah, this client that, the one from today, she's very well read in the area. This has been a relationship pattern for her for ever since she started dating, really. So she has read books about codependency and books about how narcissists and borderlines find each other and what their relationship themes and patterns are like. And yeah, any book that you would recommend to her that might be helpful, she will read. So she's actually really well read, but if anything, almost too much, then it becomes the medical student syndrome, where it's like she can highlight all the pieces in books that fit for her relationship, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's that thing. It means that you see parts of yourself in it,
right?
But yeah.
So yeah, Joe, your question: are there signs, things that you can tell that maybe you're in a codependent relationship? Maybe you're the codependent partner, or your partner's the one who's kind of losing their self. So I would say that, I guess, if you're just feeling preoccupied with the other person's emotions, the other person's well-being, if you're losing sleep at night because you're afraid of what your partner is experiencing, and if this is a common thing, I mean, once in a while, of course, loving bonded relationships, people care for each other. This is where this whole issue gets a little dicey, right? It's like we're talking about, on the one hand, we want people to attach if they want to be in this relationship, they want to be partnered, want them to have empathy and care for one another. But codependence is when it's going over the line there. It's too much. So you're caring for that other person so much that you're losing care for yourself.
Yeah, you're
So
neglecting your own needs.
you're neglecting your own needs, right?
Mhm.
And you're even more aware of their needs than yours, right?
Mhm.
And so I think any of those signs, like, wow, I'm more focused on my partner's happiness than mine, than more focused on my partner's health than mine. They're reaching their dreams and their aspirations than mine, than me reaching my own, you know. And of course, again, we want to be supportive and helpful, but this idea of losing self. So what's the downside of, I've said that a dozen times already. What do you think is the downside of losing yourself in a relationship?
Ooh, if you lose yourself, what comes to mind, you might just start to, I don't know, have a hard time kind of figuring out, like, it might affect your self-esteem if you lose yourself. Like, all of a sudden you might not be sure of yourself, of who you are. There might be more, you know, trying to, like, shying away from making decisions for yourself, especially if, you know, you more really depend on that person to give their opinion. Yeah, hard time kind of just being confident in how you're feeling or ideas about the world. There might be, yeah, those are things that come to mind for me. I don't know if you all agree with that, but yeah.
I think it could be counterproductive. It can keep two people very stuck, right? If you're in the more of that, what Ryan was describing, kind of more of that caretaker role, then maybe you're neglecting what you need to do to make sure that you're doing okay, and that could lead to a sense of anxiety and sadness and a lot of mental health concerns. So you might be neglecting, again, your well-being, and the other person, they might be kind of stuck in this pattern of, it could be addiction or abuse or whatever it might be as well, right?
Yeah.
I'm also kind of curious about, you know, if we look at that kind of the caretaker role that sometimes people take on, why does that happen? And I think that can be complicated as well. That might be stemming from their own lived experience and wanting to, almost like a defense mechanism for dealing with fear and lack of control, is trying to fix a situation or trying to help people, right?
Well, if I do, like, as a caretaker role, to take it to the extreme, right? Like, if I do everything for you, then you will not be mad at me, right? Like you said, it's a protective strategy, a defense mechanism in a sense. If I do everything for you, then you rely on me, and then you can't leave me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of narratives that go with that.
Well,
yeah.
So you're saying, like, a lot of the roads lead back to abandonment or a fear of abandonment, right?
Disconnection, yeah. Or there might be some patterns that are stemming from their past, right?
Sure.
Their experience with parents or their own caregivers. Yeah, it can be kind of complicated, but there might be some, you know, maybe some difficulties and challenges that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I think if you're noticing that there's very much whether someone's very clingy, or if you get the idea from your partner or a loved one that their happiness depends on you quite a bit, that's a kind of a sign there that maybe you're treading in the codependency waters, I would think. But
sure.
Yeah.
I think if you, just to be even more pragmatic, I think if you are asking your partner, what would you like to do this weekend? What would you like to do for vacation? What would you like to eat for dinner? And every answer you get is, oh, whatever you want. You know, I mean, once in a while, sure, or even a lot of the time that might even be okay. But if that's always the answer, then are they really showing up, right? Or is it more of kind of catering to you and I don't know if it's letting you lead or expecting you to lead, or, you know, hoping to please you by letting you get whatever you want, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's certainly something about, you know, if you truly don't have an opinion about it, that's fine. Or if you know, if it's just a pain to even think of what you want to do for the summer, that's fine too. But if that's always the case, if that partner never has a need or a want, then I think that would be something to ask them about, something to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I think one word that comes up a lot in our podcast is the word balance. Like, your relationship is important, no doubt, but having connections with friends, or working, or hobbies, or interests, or so if everything is focused on the individual, then that could definitely be problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very true. Yes.
And sometimes those hobbies or interests or friends end up shifting, I feel like, in these unhealthy relationships to what one person thinks the other, that the partner wants from them, right? Like,
yeah.
My partner likes watching shows together in the evening, so I've stopped going to the gym in the evening. And now I don't work out because I need to sleep, to whatever, so I think we have to be aware of that. So that kind of goes back, Ryan, to what you were saying about the boundary setting as well. Like, what's important to you. And but if you're always putting your partner's needs first, then sometimes those things slip, and we want to find a healthy compromise, but we don't want to over compromise ourselves.
I remember working with someone many years ago who person was very, very giving. I don't know if we would, again, codependency isn't a diagnosis, so I don't know if they would we would call them that or not, but this is a person who really gave a lot to her family, and all of her identity was kind of wrapped up in that. And I asked her one time, let's say that you had a week completely to yourself. No one had any expectations from you. You were in a town far away, and no one was worried about you. It was just completely on your own. You get to do whatever you want. Money is not an object. You can do anything that you want for this time. What would you like to do? And she said, I don't know. I don't know. We explored it a little bit. She said, maybe I'd read some books, go for a walk, but she really didn't have any of her own interests that she was nurturing. She didn't have any of her own hobbies or passions or desires of her own. And that was something that, we identified as a real need for her. She was very well aware of what her kids needed and what her husband needed and what her friends and extended family needed, but she had no idea what she needed. And I felt like that was something that, we needed to work on a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, it's great to have an identity of serving and to be a good helper of people, but again, all those roads led back to what other people want and never what she wanted.
For sure. I had a client a while ago who was experiencing some intensive grief, and I think that was the main component why she was so focused on the needs of her husband. And the husband was the last. They didn't have any kids and weren't close to their relatives or anything like that. So when the husband passed away suddenly, she had such a hard time grieving that loss and accepting that loss and moving forward, because she didn't have that sense of identity. She didn't have things she was interested in. Her whole life was kind of focused on that relationship.
Yeah. Okay. So Brooke, you're actually asking about toxic relationship patterns. And I guess the way I'm viewing codependence, or the way I've been talking about it, has been that it's somewhat an individual thing. Like, it's someone, I guess, enters into the relationship and maybe adopts again, as Chris was saying, maybe it's something that was from childhood or something, some way that they grew up, some familiarity with that sort of pattern. But as you're talking about relationship patterns, so do you think there's the other partner maybe causing or influencing that codependence, expecting it from them?
Or enabling it.
Enabling it, sure.
Potentially. There's a sender and a receiver in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the other partner isn't, maybe they think they're letting the other person be happy by doing these things? I don't know. Maybe they've tried to put a boundary and the other person got upset. Maybe,
Sure.
maybe the person, gets really sad or frustrated when they need to make decisions. So they've just taken that role, or maybe they get frustrated with them because they don't know. So they've taken that role.
Yeah.
Or they think they're helping them. Like, oh, you don't have a lot of friends of your own, so my friends are your friends. Oh, you don't have a lot of hobbies or interests. Why don't you come with me to do this? Let me
Yeah.
help you, right? And so I
Yeah.
think there's a sender and a receiver.
At the same time, though, it's still a codependency, right? It's not a dependency. Like the other individual is getting something from this as well, right?
Sure.
Like they like the fact they can make the decisions. They like the fact the other person is there to help them and support them and to, to whatever that looks like within the context of that relationship. So I think there's a sense of they want it to go on, right? They want it to continue the dynamic that exists.
Sure. They like to control, maybe, and they like to be in power and foster that, or influence that. Okay. And so I guess if when I've worked with folks with this sort of issue in the past, as individuals, I don't think I've done really much couples work that's really focused on codependence, but as an individual who's dealing with this, I guess I'm doing a lot of talking about like value and worth and self-esteem and loving yourself and like valuing your own thoughts and opinions, and I'll be asking them about their own passions and what do they want, like this question of what would you do with a week with no one depending on you, what would you do? To really help to kind of foster and nurture this idea of, oh, I have some interests too, and that's okay. It's okay for me to have interests, okay for me to want things, and I can pursue those, and it's okay for me to get pleasure out of the things that I enjoy, not just by serving people around me.
Yeah.
Boundaries could be part of it, helping them to have certain boundaries, or maybe be able to say no if they want to say no, or and it totally depends on what the codependency looks like. That might not relate to every situation, but if there's more of that trying to please that partner, there might be less of you, more sacrificing of your needs. So really trying to help, boundaries, assertiveness, making sure your needs are being met.
Sounds about right.
And the person in the relationship benefiting from the caretaker. Maybe if this is an ongoing pattern, maybe they feel that they can't do certain things. So stepping into that discomfort, maybe finding ways to take care of yourself. I don't know.
I guess I also like to talk with people about kind of what what might be an ideal relationship, right? What in a non-codependent relationship, what really happens? And I think that's when two people can be fully themselves and show up and kind of lay their cards on the table and say, here's what I want, here's what I want. Let's kind of, we're not going to agree all the time. Maybe we'll have to compromise, maybe we'll have to negotiate, but two people are showing up to this relationship to really relate, instead of one person leading and the other person capitulating,
Yeah. But what happens if they gravitate, like what they want is, will lead them down a path that is considered unhealthy and dysfunctional, right? Because that's what they're familiar with,
Yeah.
Like another word that pops into my mind is reciprocation. Like what you put into it, you kind of get back. Like it's a little more balanced in that way. But again, it's so subjective based on each relationship.
Sure.
But in some, there might be some situations where someone might feel like they put a lot in, but they might feel like they might not get a lot. And that could be if you're giving more but not receiving it, but you might stay in that relationship because you might feel like you won't be okay without them, or you're just so used to being with them, or I think that's where you might get caught in that, like that being dependent or codependent on that person or that relationship. So So it might not be equal parts each way.
Mhm.
That's true. But if there's someone who's having a hard time making decisions, then the other partner can encourage them to do so, right? It doesn't have to be
Totally.
used in a dysfunctional
Totally.
way or for
Yeah.
manipulation, or there can be, you can grow together in a healthy way, I would imagine, right?
For sure.
That's something I've been talking with couples about more and more recently. And I don't see a ton of couples, but I usually have a few on my caseload. And I like this idea of let's be very clear about what our, I don't know, shortcomings or areas for growth are, and let's have one another be each other's biggest cheerleader in that area. Like, hey, it's great when someone can say, hey, you know what, I tend to hide when we're making decisions about something, a vacation or a dinner or whatever it might be. I tend to bury my own feelings and just focus on you because I don't want to have a conflict or I don't want to upset you. And I'd really like to work on showing up more and being more authentic and speaking my mind. And then if the partner can say, oh, great, I'll help you with that, so then the next time they have a discussion and say, okay, well, what are we going to do this weekend? And the codependent partner says, I don't care, whatever you want. And the other partner says, nope, I'm holding you to this. Think about it. What do you really want to do? We're going to do what you want this weekend. And that can be really great if you really have a partnership where people are helping each other grow. Really being explicit about that. It can be a really great partnership.
Yeah, I agree.
So okay, back to toxic. Brooke.
So we just also use that word toxic because it's also kind of a hot word.
Yeah, like toxic masculinity. We're familiar.
Unhealthy. Yes. And then I was like, no, hot words. I need to be on the top 10.
Yes.
It was manipulative.
Good choice of words, Brooke. Let's talk about gaslighting, because that is a very, speaking of hot words, that's like one of the hottest psychological terms in the last few years.
Absolutely. It really blew up there, I think, in the past 5 years, maybe.
Yeah.
People didn't really use that term very often. And then all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah.
Gaslighting.
I used to teach that in a psych class 20 years ago, and no one knew what I was talking about. But in the last 2 or 3 years, everyone knows what gaslighting is, or at least they think they do. So, gaslighting. Everyone's probably heard the origin story for this. Shall I share it anyway?
Yeah, I don't think I actually do.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Gaslighting is actually based on a movie from 1940. It was made twice. Same movie was made twice, 1940 and 41, called Gaslight, which was about a husband and wife. And I believe there's something like an inheritance involved. Like the wife was going to get a lot of money. And the husband decided that what he would do is every day in their house, this is old-timey house, right? Gas lights in their house. He would turn down the light in the living room just a smidgen, right? And so the wife would walk in and go, is it a little darker in here today? And he'd say, oh, honey, I don't know what you're talking about. It's fine, right? And then every day, progressively, that would happen. And there would be other things that she would do, he would do to make her think that she was going crazy. And he would like, oh, what's wrong with your mind? You must be losing it. Are you okay, dear? Is everything all right? And eventually had her locked up in, I guess in those days, an asylum or a mental hospital, basically. Having convinced herself, he had convinced her that she was of unfit mind. She was going crazy. And so that's the movie. That's the film called Gaslight.
Also why they call it crazy making.
It's crazy making. Yes, it's exactly crazy making. So crazy making ideas. The idea here is that someone, and I usually hear it attributed in narcissistic relationships, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's two people in a relationship where one person is questioning reality for the other person, right?
Using psychological manipulation.
Using
essentially,
manipulation,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
to manipulate them into thinking something that they believe to be true is completely irrational, right?
Yeah, or delusional in some way.
Yes.
That
yes.
never actually happened. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. So a really familiar one is like, two people are talking. One partner starts yelling at the other person. Like, how could you say this? Whatever that might be. Screw you, something like that, right? And the other partner says, I can't handle it. You're screaming at me. Stop it. And the other person says, I wasn't screaming. What are you talking about? Maybe I raised my voice a little bit, but that wasn't screaming. I wasn't mad. So then that makes the other person go, wait, what do I believe now? Do I believe what I perceived, or do I believe what they're telling me right now? And now I'm having to kind of question what's reality and what's fantasy here. Was I overreacting? Oh no, maybe it's my fault that I was overreacting.
Yeah.
So these sorts of things on many different scales, and
a lot of deceit.
Yes, deceit. And I don't know that the gaslighter is really consciously thinking, you know what, I'm trying to make this person feel crazy, but the effect of it is just that. It makes them question reality, makes them wonder, am I the one at fault here, or am I the one who's misperceiving things, or out of touch with reality? What's happening?
Yeah. And now that the term is more common, I find, or for my younger female clients, like women in their 20s, who are aware of this term, when they get a sense of that, they are turning to their friends or family members and connecting out, like reaching for that, hey, this is what happened. What's your take on this? Like, am I being reasonable? Like they realize that how they're feeling about the situation is being questioned, and they're going for more support or feedback.
That's good.
Yeah, so I found that that's kind of more interesting.
Mhm.
And whether that's healthy or not, I have yet to really decide.
How could it be unhealthy, Brooke?
Well, meaning like, so in the moment, if they're not necessarily standing up for themselves or acknowledging it, like they're feeling that questioning, right? And there's that self-doubt. So if somebody's yelling and then like, well, I wasn't actually yelling, I've raised my voice or whatever, the self-doubt of that, opposed to stand the ground and be like, no, that's bullshit, you were yelling and this is how it's still putting somebody in a spot where they feel that they have to be questioned and then ask for support. But I'm glad they are asking for support.
Yeah.
If that makes, it would be nice if it could be pushed just a little bit more where they can actually stand ground.
Sure.
Yeah. Ryan was saying before that sometimes it's not deliberate. In that movie, it was definitely deliberate. Sometimes it's not, though. So why do people gaslight others?
I think to save themselves from shame and embarrassment.
Yeah. So some projection there maybe, or just deflection.
Yeah. Or they know, I think on some level, that what they're doing is not right and they're covering their tracks a little bit.
I think it's, I agree. Yeah, shame and embarrassment may be a part of that. I think that may be kind of deep down the hierarchy. I think that that really they're trying to win on the most base level. They're just trying to win the argument or win the conflict, Oh no, it wasn't me, it was you, I mean, I don't know if it was it may have been Dennis Rodman. I don't know if you I don't want to speculate. Some famous celebrity in the 90s whose spouse walked in on them in bed with another person, and the spouse goes, what are you doing right here? And they said, it wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't me. Right? Like, it's right there in front of them, but wasn't me. So, anything to deflect any of the blame and to just throw some question in there. I mean, it's a red herring in a way. It's like, now we're talking about this thing instead of talking about this thing. We're not talking about an affair. We're talking about, what's reality and what's fantasy,
Yeah, it's a giant deflection.
Huge deflection. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the conversation becomes, am I crazy? Did I hear that right? Did I see that right? Opposed to, yeah, the matter at hand.
And I think that as far as the gaslighter is concerned, as soon as you ask that question, as soon as the other person asks that question, am I crazy? They've kind of won. That's it. Now that you're questioning your reality, now that you're questioning whether or not it's they can trust themselves, trust their own perception.
Yeah. Now the gaslighter can control your perception, right?
Exactly. Like, sure. At least call it into question,
Yeah.
There's an extra step here.
All that powerful.
Yes. So Brooke, I was asking before about the, asking what's the problem with asking other people. And, I think there is some value, especially in a gaslighting situation, to ask people like, hey, am I crazy here? Is there, can I get some sort of objectivity about this? If I walk in on my spouse and they're in bed with another person, is that still a wrong thing? That sort of thing, right? If it's non-consensual, right?
I'm really glad they're asking, because they're bringing that power of the gaslighter by getting more eyes and ears on this. The gaslighter might be able to gaslight one person, but are they able to gaslight 10? Probably not. Maybe not.
I raised that because there's another sort of phenomenon that I talk about with some clients, which is when they're trying to make a decision in their life about something, and they just run it. They're always running it by all of their friends first, right? Which I call living life by committee, right? Like, hey, should I date him or not? What do you think? Right? Which is, it's nice to get opinions from other people, but you really don't want your decisions, your most important decisions, to be made by vote of the people around you, right? You're the one who has to live with the consequences. So I just distinguish those two. I think it is important to have some objective. If you're questioning your own reality, like, hey, I think this was an argument. I think this was, there was something wrong that happened here. Am I right or am I wrong? That's probably a good time to run it by really trusted, really close friends. People who will even tell you when you're in the wrong, right? Not just yes people, right?
And I think it could happen in some subtle ways too, is just if you feel like a person is not validating how you're feeling, or is saying like, oh, you're always overreacting, or you're overreacting, you're being too sensitive, it's actually not that big of a deal.
Great one, Joanna.
That is.
Right? I think that's more common in many relationships, whether the person doing it realizes, but because over time that person's now like, well, I'm mad, but should I be mad? Because they say I'm overreacting. So maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. So people start not trusting their initial feelings about things. And that's where it gets dangerous, I think, because you just stop trusting yourself. That's all. You start not listening to those initial feelings and your concerns, because so
I think that is beautiful. That's really the best example of it, I think. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. This is not a big deal. I don't know what you're reacting to, because then that also causes you to question, is that true or is it false? Are you in the right or are you not? That's a great point. Yes. So what would you do to someone who's feeling gaslit? How would you do to them? If you were in therapy with someone who felt like their partner was gaslighting them, how would you respond to them?
I think as therapists, we're not friends of the client. So I hope we have a little more objectivity when it comes to the situation. So I'd listen as much as I can, try to understand all the different factors in regard to the situation. See if there's any patterns there as well. But we could be in a position where we can offer some advice to help them navigate through that, right?
There's also validating the emotion that was had, right? To say, Of course you felt that way. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's name that emotion and let's accept that emotion. And that's okay. That's okay that you felt that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
For
Yeah,
sure.
therapy is essentially the opposite of gaslighting.
How do you
Yeah,
mean?
if you're going to be validated and listened
It's
to.
just validated, normalized, listened to. Like, sure, we're going to question some things, but it's, yeah, therapy isn't going to like really shake that. Like, we don't, yeah.
Sure.
I think, yeah, I think it's tough, and you'd want to encourage that person to, if there's an upsetting situation, to just, yeah, if after, like, take some time to think about it, and you know, you want to be able to encourage them to, you know, work on feeling more confident in their perspective, you know, and validating, be like, you know, let's trust yourself a little bit more, or to, you know, speak up, or to be able to hold their ground a bit more, say, actually, I think I did feel that way, and I think that's, you know, I'm okay saying that it's tough. And in certain relationships where it's actually so, like, someone's gaslit all the time, cool, their confidence is so broken down. And I had a client in mind, like, and it was just ongoing for years. And when someone's in that deep, whew, it's kind of really hard. It's heartbreaking because they've now started to not even trust themselves. So I would
Yes.
encourage the person to speak up, or at least, you know, really encourage them to start to trust themselves, or little situations, give examples of, hey, well, you trusted yourself there, and maybe you can bring this up. But at the end of the day, if the person you're in a relationship with is going to keep making you feel bad for stuff, or making you question your own reality, red flag central, and try to help that person navigate whether that, you know,
Yeah.
how to navigate that unhealthy relationship.
I would like to share a brief lecture that I share with some clients about mirroring. Is that all right?
That'd be great.
Okay. So this is a common metaphor that we talk about in therapy a lot of times, mirroring. It's something they talk about with early childhood stuff. And the idea is that starting in childhood, a parent, an important task of a parent is to mirror back to the child who they are, what they're feeling, so this is something that's very natural for a lot of people. Like a child is crying and the parent makes a sad face. Oh, you're crying, you poor thing, right? The child's happy and the parent lights up. Oh, you're happy. So it's this idea that the parent is actually in some ways like visually a mirror of the kid. Like, the kid is expressing an emotion and the parent is showing them that very same emotion back on their face. And the kid goes, oh, that's what that looks like, right? And also showing that it's okay, like it's normal. That makes sense. Oh, you're hungry, or you're tired and you're feeling sad, or whatever it might be. So this mirroring stuff is important. The problems that come with mirroring, especially in early childhood attachment stuff, is, let's say that you have a parent who is really depressed for one reason or another, right? And so the child is showing these emotions, and the parents, they're so depressed they can't really even empathize with the child. They're kind of blank faced and they don't really have much to feed back to the kid. And so the kid kind of questions, well, whoa, what am I feeling? I don't even know what this is. Like, they start to question their own emotions. And sometimes, or there are times when, what I term like the funhouse mirror, where, you know how you go into a funhouse at a circus and, like, the mirror is distorted, everything's kind of all over the place, right? You look one way in a regular flat mirror, but you look at a totally different way in a funhouse mirror. And that's when, like, you come to your parent and you're like, I'm really sad, and then the parent says, how dare you get sad right now, right? So you're showing them sadness and you're receiving anger back, and now you're like, whoa, that seems different than what I'm experiencing, you know? That's a funhouse mirror effect, where it's like, whoa, I guess sadness is a bad thing, so I shouldn't feel that anymore, right? And I think we have those same sorts of things in relationships as well. This is where it feeds into gaslighting. You know, you come to your partner in adulthood and you say, wow, what you did really hurt my feelings. You know, I really feel, I really feel bummed out by that. I can't believe you did that. And the partner says, what are you talking about? That's a non-issue, back off. No one else is upset by that. What's your
You're
problem?
overreacting.
You're overreacting, right? And then you're like, whoa, that's a distortion here. Like, I thought that this was just something for me to be upset about, and you're telling me that it's nothing. There's a mismatch in the mirror there. What therapy is supposed to be, and this is what therapists we're supposed to be training to do, and hopefully, continuing our own training throughout our careers and therapy from time to time and all that kind of stuff, to try to get rid of our own funhouse stuff, to try to be the best non-biased mirror that we can be, right? And to go into a counseling session with a therapist, with a client, and be like, oh, this is what I hear from you. This is what it feels like. I see what you're saying, right? We're trying not to distort this and like, get angry at our client's sadness or, dismiss their feelings. We're trying to be a really congruent mirror, right? So there's my little speech on.
Yes, our answers are basically the same then. Yeah.
What's
that?
that?
Yeah, same.
I said our answers are basically the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. No, good.
Ryan,
good job.
analogy.
You brought out the funhouse mirror.
Well,
like
I
that.
mean, there's just kind of bringing in the fact that this is something that's important for people throughout their life. When you, and really if you're 60 years old and you are feeling angry about something and you share that with someone else and they share something completely different back to you, that's disturbing. That's distressing.
Yeah.
That's the funhouse mirror effect.
No, it's great. Great analogy and story, and well put.
Yeah. I think too, what is important as well is adults who, like you said, if they might not recognize that it's a funhouse mirror when they're in a relationship because they grew up with that as a kid,
right?
Like you said, right. So if their parent, if constantly they would express feelings and they were told to be quiet, to not be sad, you're overreacting, like don't get angry like that, or you shouldn't even, whatever. If you grow up with that, all of a sudden, if you start hearing that in a relationship, you might not actually recognize it as, right, that funhouse mirror, because that's all you're used to. So hopefully, whether you have other relationships where you can feel that validation, or in therapy or something like that, or start to recognize, actually, that's not okay. That there's something that is gaslighting. There's something that's not a healthy sign in a relationship. And it wasn't when I was a kid, and that you can understand that a bit more. So
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Another something else that pops up quite a bit is a scenario like that, but there's emotional manipulation there, or blame. So yeah, I did that, but I did it because you did this, so I did it because of you.
You made me.
Thrown back at the person, right? Which is obviously very damaging as well.
Why'd you make me hit you?
Yeah.
One of the old sayings I used to hear, right? Why'd you make me, get drunk and hit you? Or something?
No, it's true. Because I love you so much, or because you angered me, or whatever it might be. So you're putting the blame on the other person, which is awful.
I'm sorry for yelling, but you weren't listening to me, or you didn't come, and it's just if anyone says I'm sorry, or I'm sorry for this, but you did this, that's not a real apology. You're still putting that on the other person, and you did not have to yell even if you were upset. You did not have to hit even if you're upset. That's on you. So
yeah, that's true.
Extreme forms with the hitting, all that stuff, but I think there's a lot more subtle things for sure.
Yeah, it's the same kind of ideas. You're mad at me. Well, you did this, and you keep on rehashing a mistake in the other person's.
Just back and forth.
Oh yes. Well, sometime in the not too distant future, we may do a piece on forgiveness and apologies. So keep yourself. So listeners, stay tuned. Forgiveness and apologies may be a topic at some point.
But not next week, because next week is book club.
but not next week, right? Because we're talking about the gifts next week, right?
Whenever you say forgiveness, I can always think of the movie Just Friends. Forgiveness is more than saying sorry. If anyone's seen it, Ryan Reynolds, Anna Faris, it's a good one.
Watch it every year. It's the first Christmas movie I watch.
No, it's ridiculous. Anyway.
Is it a Christmas movie?
Well, it's based at
There's
Christmas
Christmas in it.
time,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
consider it a Christmas movie.
Best Friends?
Just Friends.
Just Friends.
Just Friends.
Just Friends with
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds.
A famous Canadian. I know. He's a Vancouverite, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He's a big deal.
He's
Big
a-
deal for sure.
It's a big deal. Totally. He's great. Well, look, we need to wrap this up for tonight. We'll come back to Just Friends and forgiveness and all those other things another time. But for now, run out and buy your copy of The Gift. We're going to talk about it next week. It's going to be great. And please try to address your codependent and or gaslighting behaviors. Look for clear mirrors in your life. And that's it for tonight. So like and subscribe on Apple, Google, Podbean, Audible, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. Send your questions to info@mentalhealthbootcamp.com. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Tell a friend or two. We're 55. And we'll say good night, everybody. It's up to you. Good night, everybody.
Bye,
Everybody.
everyone.
Bye. Good night.